Back in 2007, the Ken Robertson Motor Coach Company had a customer who needed a booth that easily converts into a bed. Since the customer never actually got the work done, I wasn't paid for my designs. Although this design looks rather plain, I did design the table base in such a way as to completely support the tabletop when it is lowered into the bed position. Also, I figured out how to make the tabletop weigh only a pound while being raised and lowered. The big drawback to this standard booth configuration is storage. Rear storage is so cumbersome, I'm much too lazy to even lift those rear cushions to expose all the accumulated junk that will never be used. Long before the Wasted Spaces TV series first aired, I engineered a list of space-saving devices involving tracks and conveyors. If you know of anyone interested in mass-producing a list of easy-access storage items, for keeping track of these storage compartments for instance, I can provide a list of designs that solve nearly any storage problem. Ken Robertson's customer also wanted a bunk bed. The aircraft bunks I designed in the early 1990s sell for $100,000 each. They also turn into couches, pretty much like this design here. I also designed all the necessary latches, trip mechanisms, and so forth needed to make my projects work. Pat Murphy, an engineer at Miami-based Aircraft Modular Products, is credited with designing this track and swivel mechanism that launched AMP into a multi-million-dollar business in the early 1980s. By coincidence, I was employed as an upholsterer working for a Murphy family in the same area during the late 1970s, when the Miami-Dade sheriff beat me up behind a billion-dollar-a-year furniture store chain. I soon afterward found myself in Tampa, being bounced around from upholstery shop to upholstery shop on the subliminal, dim-witted upholstery helper program. Before the Miami-Dade sheriff chopped me up into bite-sized chunks for low-level mobsters to feed on, I was also attempting to design a practical billion-speed transmission, hoping to invent something the automakers will pay me big bucks for. In fact, if you know of investors with big political muscles who don't use fraudulent police files to manipulate wages and living conditions in order to steal copyrights and patents long before their victims can even think about filing, I can revolutionize the hybrid car industry with my electric motor and a wheel designs. For instance, a few months after I first started looking for investors for my project, Tech TV, later sold to G4, profiled a company who stole my project as effectively doubling its product's rated horsepower by placing the motor in the wheel, therefore eliminating a long list of horsepower zapping drivetrain elements such as gears and U-joints. Obviously, the reason this stolen invention isn't selling like wildfire is because the motor has to be coupled to a transmission. For instance, my best ultra-compact billion-speed transmission design. If you know of investors who want to make a TV series about corrupt public officials placing their victims in a 99.99% tax bracket and then showing up with a SWAT team to sell off their victims' property over a dispute as to whether the government is also entitled to a third of the victims' meager slave labor paychecks, we can start with the circumstances surrounding my failed business ventures of the 1970s. For instance, I came up with this idea to sew covers for phone blocks together. Since, along with a list of other expensive coincidences, a variation on this idea quickly showed up for sale at Kmart, as the police surveillance crew, whispering in my ear, insisted I unconsciously stole the idea from them, I tried my best to design these beds, tables, and chairs that pop out of the floor in secrecy. Of course, in the extortion and murder business, the trick is to make my private projects public domain, as I was long ago completely shut out of the profit loop. For instance, I tell potential investors I have a fold-out mansion worth $50 billion in mass production. These politically muscle-bound investors simply go to the people running the so-called Community Crime Watch program I live under, who are most likely the sheriff and FBI, in order to gain access to that list of ideas and inventions I came up with that all of the fraudulent police files concerning me revolve around. So these investors decide to do something like make a 2007 Chrysler commercial, designed to make a business I was run out of 30 years ago public domain. Of course, since none of the large jet aircraft interior companies I've worked for have taken the bulk out of these designs, hoping to collect $100 million per interior until copycats drastically reduce prices, I'm pretty much the engineer for the job. Of course, these corporations don't pay well, while there's always some kind of government-trained killer whispering in my ear, insisting I'm some sort of inmate of the covert U.S. prison system, teetering on death row.